Pompeii woke up to an ordinary Roman morning. Bread was coming out of ovens. Vendors were shouting in the streets. People were heading to baths, opening shops, arguing about money, gossiping about neighbors, and probably complaining that the city was dusty again. Behind them, Mount Vesuvius sat in the background, quiet, huge, ignored. To the people of Pompeii, it was just part of the landscape, a mountain, nothing more. They did not know they were living through the first minutes of one of the most famous disasters in human history. By the next day, the city would be buried. Its streets, homes, ovens, graffiti, sandals, jewelry, and unfinished errands would disappear under ash and pumice. And almost 2,000 years later, people would still be looking at Pompeii's final day, trying to understand how an ordinary morning turned into a volcano apocalypse. The strangest part is that Pompeii had warning signs. The region had earthquakes. Buildings had been damaged before, walls cracked, temples needed repairs. People knew the ground could shake, but they did not understand Vesuvius the way we understand it now. They did not have volcano monitoring, evacuation alerts, hazard maps, or anyone saying maybe living beside the giant silent cone is a long-term problem. So life continued. The baker baked, the merchant sold, the rich homeowner worried about his property, the street vendor worried about his stall. Everyone was busy with normal problems. Then Vesuvius stopped being background scenery. Around the middle of the day, the mountain erupted. A massive column of ash, gas, and volcanic material blasted into the sky. From across the Bay of Naples, Pliny the Younger later described the cloud as rising like a pine tree, tall, narrow, then spreading out at the top. His letters are the only surviving eyewitness account from the wider disaster zone, and they are the reason we know so much about what people saw from a distance. But inside Pompeii, there was no calm scientific explanation. There was just the sky changing. At first, people probably stared, confused, frightened, trying to decide if this was something that would pass. Then the ash and pumice began to fall, not lava flowing through the streets like in a movie. Pompeii's nightmare began with the sky raining stone. At first, people could still move. They could still think. They could still choose. And those choices were brutal. Some people fled early, which may have saved them. Some stayed inside, hoping their homes would protect them. Some tried to gather valuables, coins, jewelry, lamps, things that made sense in a normal emergency, but meant very little when the emergency was the atmosphere turning against you. Others ran through the streets protecting their heads however they could. Pliny described people tying pillows over their heads to shield themselves from falling debris. Recent finds near Pompeii have shown just how improvised survival could be. One fleeing man was discovered with a terracotta dish near his head, along with an oil lamp, an iron ring, and coins. A person trying to escape with ordinary objects. That is what makes Pompeii feel so close. These were not legends. They were people making split-second decisions with whatever they had in their hands. But the eruption kept going. The ash grew deeper. The pumice piled higher. Streets became harder to cross. Doors became harder to open. Then the roofs began to fail. Pumice is light when you hold one piece, but when enough of it falls for hours, it becomes crushing weight. Roofs collapsed under the load. Houses that seemed safe became traps. So Pompeii turned into a terrible choice. Stay inside and the building might collapse on you. Go outside and the sky was still raining ash and stone. The city was being buried while people were still inside it. As the day turned into night, darkness covered everything. A volcanic darkness, thick enough to swallow the sun. Lamps flickered. People shouted through ash. Families tried to stay together. Some moved toward the gates. Some searched for loved ones. Some waited, hoping the worst had passed. That hope was human, and it was wrong. Nearby, other communities were being destroyed in different ways. Herculaneum, closer to the volcano, faced deadly surges of hot ash and gas. Pliny the Elder, commander of the Roman fleet, tried to sail toward the danger to help people escape. He did not survive. Back in Pompeii, the falling debris had already made the city almost unrecognizable. The eruption had turned streets into trenches, homes into shelters, shelters into tombs. And Vesuvius still had one final stage. The huge eruption column above the mountain began to collapse. When that happened, clouds of hot gas, ash, and volcanic debris surged outward across the land. They were not something a person could fight. Not with a pillow, not with a dish, not with Roman confidence. In the early hours of the next day, Pompeii was hit. For those still in the city, there was almost no time. The surge swept through streets, houses, shops, baths, courtyards, and hiding places. The city that had survived hours of falling pumice and darkness was finally overwhelmed. Pompeii stopped being a living city. It became a sealed moment. Bread remained in ovens. Paintings remained on walls. Graffiti remained scratched into buildings. Cups, lamps, tools, jewelry, and coins stayed where people had left them. The same disaster that erased Pompeii also preserved it. That is the terrible irony. Vesuvius destroyed the city, but the ash protected the evidence. It locked ordinary Roman life in place with terrifying detail. Centuries later, excavators found empty spaces in the hardened ash where bodies had once been. By pouring plaster into those spaces, they revealed the final positions of some of Pompeii's victims. They were not people turned to stone. That is the popular myth. They were casts of the spaces left behind after bodies decayed inside the ash. One moment, someone was buying bread. One moment, someone was walking home. One moment, someone was carrying coins, a lamp, or a dish, thinking those things might still matter. Then the mountain in the background became the main character. Pompeii had one last normal day, a day of food, noise, business, errands, arguments, and routine. Then the sky changed, the roofs collapsed, the streets vanished, and the city was buried so completely that its worst day became one of history's clearest windows into the ancient world. Pompeii became famous because it was erased. Its tragedy became evidence. Its final panic became archaeology. And Vesuvius, by destroying a city, accidentally preserved one of the most haunting snapshots of Roman life ever found. That is why Pompeii still feels so alive, not because it survived, but because it was frozen at the exact moment ordinary life ran out of time.